Yes, she is. Because I was getting close. Oh, I know. Okay, Council will call this meeting to order. I welcome everyone in the audience and those that are joining us by Rogers TV or by live streaming. Just to let you know, there will be an in-camera session and a Rising report today after the in-camera, and typically Rogers shuts down after the in-camera session, so we will be live streaming the Rising report. So I encourage people to stay tuned on through the live streaming for that. So I will read the Indigenous acknowledgement. Today we acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We are thankful to share in the special spirit of this place, rich in the energy of Mother Earth, our ancestors, and the love of all creation. With that, I will look to the Deputy Mayor for the adoption of the agenda.
Mayor Saunderson, it's moved by me and seconded by Councillor Coney. Be it resolved that the content of the council agenda and addendum for January 14th, 2019 be adopted as presented.
Thank you, and I'll call the vote on that. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest and the nature thereof. Any declarations today? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that situation as we get through the agenda, please let me know. And I will, sorry.
If it's a matter where I have a conflict for something that's in camera, do I hold that announcement over?
Yes, you can raise it now and then you will again raise it in the in-camera session.
Okay, so I guess I have to know. So it's the item concerning the local planning appeal tribunal, 174 St. Paul Street. As it transpires, my husband's, a lawyer in my husband's office is acting on that matter. Therefore, he has a pecuniary interest, and therefore I do, and therefore I'm declaring conflict.
Thank you. Any others? No? Not seeing none, and then I will look for the adoption of the minutes. Who has that motion?
Yeah, that is me, Your Worship, moved by Councillor MacLeod and seconded by Councillor Madigan that the minutes of the regular meeting of Council held December 17th, 2018 be approved as presented.
Thank you. I'll call that motion. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Are there any business? Well, first of all, I guess looking to see, make sure that the minutes are accurate. Any changes or comments on the minutes? No, and I'll look for business arising then from the previous minutes. Any business arising? No, seeing none, then we will move on to community announcements. And before I go around the table, we are going to have a video presentation from our new communications officer, Adam Ferguson. This was shown yesterday. It debuted yesterday at the levy and was a huge success, so we wanted to share it with the of Collingwood today again. So I'll look to you, Adam, to play the video, please.
The town of Collingwood is a responsible and sustainable community that leverages its core strengths: a vibrant downtown, a setting within the natural environment, and an extensive waterfront. In 2018, Collingwood worked hard to offer a healthy, affordable, and four-season lifestyle to its residents, businesses, and visitors. 2018 saw the construction of the Ah Wang Gathering Place at Harborview Park and a new scoreboard at the Eddie Bush Memorial Arena. Collingwood hosted major family-friendly events like the International Elvis Festival, side launch days, concerts at the Shipyards Amphitheatre, downtown farmers markets, and the Frozen in Time Festival featuring Rogers Hometown Hockey. The Collingwood Public Library made improvements to their second floor by providing more quiet study space and wired study desks. The library also added more programs for seniors and continued to offer quality programming for youth, families, and new Canadians. Almost 1,000 people pass through the library doors daily. Fire services added new tools to enhance safety and efficiency, like digital radio communications, a fire extinguisher training tool, and an LED safety information sign at the fire station. Collingwood firefighters improved their skills with new training in vehicle extrication and elevator rescue. 2018 saw upgrades to the Minnesota Street Pumping Station, Highway 26 widening from 6th Line to the Pretty River Parkway, and also paving and sewer enhancements on 7th Street and 8th Street. The cogen project at the wastewater treatment facility allowed the town to significantly limit its greenhouse gas emissions, and a new transit terminal and public washroom facility was built on Pine Street. The town of Collingwood continued to grow in 2018 with new development and opportunities, while celebrating and encouraging the heritage that makes this community so attractive. The town began to address regional housing shortages with secondary suite zoning and the Attainable Accommodation Report. The Business Development Center continued to support small businesses, entrepreneurship, and career advancement initiatives with regional partnerships, business in motion speaking forums, business surveys, and expanded transit opportunities. Experience Collingwood on social media has become a booming source of information and promotion.
In 2018, Town Council focused on accountable local government, revitalization of our waterfront, healthy lifestyles, arts and culture, and economic development. In the fall of 2018, we had an election, which saw a new council come to the table with an interesting mixture of returning council members and their experience and new council members and their experience. We look forward to working for our residents in 2019. Collingwood continues to be a great place to live, work, and play. Discover more at collingwood.ca. Fantastic, thank you, Adam. And that video is available on the town website?
Not just yet on the town website through your worship. It is available on YouTube.
YouTube, okay, great, thank you. And with that, I think we'll come back on the live streaming before we leave community announcements, but I'm going to go around the table now, starting with you, Deputy Mayor, and community announcements.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I'll have some announcements that are more of a community nature, I think, as part of my county report. But I would be remiss if I didn't offer congratulations on a successful first Mayor's Levy. I think that everyone who was in attendance yesterday had a fantastic time, and you should be commended for a great event. Thank you.
Mr. McLeod.
I have two hockey-related community events that I'd like to highlight, including the annual Hockey Day in Collingwood, which is not hometown hockey. Ron McLean is not expected to be here. However, high school students on the hockey teams will be playing all day Wednesday from 8 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock in the evening on a Wednesday at the Eddie Bush. In addition to that, there is an event called Hockey for Hope. It is the girls teams playing, and that is on Saturday, starting at 5 o'clock with games at 5, 6, and 7 at Central Park Arena. And proceeds from the event are going to my friend's house. And there will be a bake table for your Sunday morning breakfast, and you can partake in some baked goods provided by a local councillor who will remain nameless.
Thank you. Councillor McLeod. Councillor Comey.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone about the upcoming Be the Change film series and their screening of Call of the Forest this coming Wednesday, January 16th at the Simcoe Street Theatre. Shows are at 5 and 7:30 p.m. Tickets are $10 with proceeds benefiting the Collingwood Youth Centre and the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust. More information can be found at bethechangefilmseries.com, and I'll be at the 7:30 screening and I hope to see you there.
Thank you. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. Echo Deputy Mayor about the levy. I want to personally thank you as the mayor for giving it back to council and allowing all of us to take part in it. Very appreciative of that and shows real leadership and a team approach, so thank you very much for that. It was a wonderful day. And secondly, congrats to our wonderful fire department. They went out there and rescued a deer from Georgian Bay, lovingly referred to as Bucky. You couldn't have given the guy a better name, like Bruce or something cool, but Bucky survived because of the quick action of our fire department and a couple local citizens. So that is community support at its best. Thank you very much for being a first responder to all. You're allowed to smile, Chief. It's a good thing. So if they'll save a deer, hopefully, if I ever need help out in the bay, Lord knows I'll be there one day, you'll get there. And lastly, the comment about the video, I love it, but I absolutely can't stand the photo of the council. It's you could have picked one that I didn't look like a moron in. So I thank you for showing that on YouTube over and over and over. Much appreciated. Those are my comments. Thank you.
At least you didn't have a speaking part. I was trying to remember my lines.
Yeah, thanks for picking up the thing on that, Brian. Make me feel a little bit better.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have nothing tonight.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just one, last Tuesday, January the 8th, I had my first opportunity to do a ribbon cutting. Had the privilege of representing yourself in council at Good Energy Conditioning. That's owned by Sarah Heipel, and she was celebrating a new location at 18A Huron Street, which is above the Crow restaurant. And I was there, it was already dark, but that's going to be a spectacular view when the sun is up from there, especially in the summer. So that's all.
Great, thank you. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. It is my privilege and honor this evening to introduce the beautiful artwork that you find in the council chambers this evening. It is a reconciliation art project. The project is titled Call to Action number 83, after the report of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Action number 83, which calls upon Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists to undertake collaborative projects and produce works that contribute to the reconciliation process. Project curator Mary Louise Myers was inspired by this call to action, and we have a video queued up here where Mary Louise can explain the process and how this came about.
Hello, my name is Mary Louise Myers, and I'm here in the Collingwood Council Chamber with the artwork from Call to Action number 83 hanging on the walls behind me. Begun in 2015 by 8 Indigenous and 8 non-Indigenous artists from Simcoe County area. In response to the presentation of the Truth and Reconciliation Report, we chose to respond to the call number 83, which calls artists of Indigenous and non-Indigenous backgrounds to come together and promote cooperative efforts of art to promote reconciliation. These artworks are going to be on display here at the Council Chamber until March. On January 30th from 7 to 8:30 p.m., the town of Collingwood invites us all to the Simcoe Street Theatre to attend a presentation and discussion called Envisioning a Future Towards Reconciliation. It'll give you a chance maybe to answer the question, what can you as an individual do? Which call to action could you as an individual take part in?
So also, Mayor Saunderson, just also to note that this is being done in partnership with the Wawasagamine Arts and Culture Board in showcasing the aluminum prints. and it will be from January 14th to March 8th. And the public is invited to view the panels during council and committee meetings or Thursdays in January and February between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. or by contacting the Art and Culture Coordinator, Tanya, to make other arrangements for something special. Mary Louise did refer to the event at the Simcoe Street Theatre. The event is free to attend, but guests are asked to reserve seats. It's not a specific seat, but to let them know you're going to be there. It's at the website culturesharecollingwood.eventbrite.com or by contacting the arts and culture at collingwood.ca. And also at that event on January 30th, there will be a screening of the Alwyn Gathering Circle Build and refreshments following the presentation. So I'm looking forward very much to that event.
Miigwech. Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My announcement is also arts and culture related, and I wanted to let everyone know that at our library, beginning on February the 7th for 5 Thursdays in a row, they're having a writing workshop, and it is being offered by the Gaslight Community Theatre, and it's called Page to Stage Scene Writing Workshop. And the important part is that it's going to be under the guidance of playwright and humorist Dan Needles. So this is everyone's opportunity to learn how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a number of announcements tonight. I'd like to start off with thanking staff for the excellent job they did at the New Year's levy. There was a lot of work that went into that. I think we had a turnout larger than we expected, about 280 people. So it was a wonderful afternoon, and it would not have been the success that it was without staff's hard work. Also wanted to say that last Wednesday, when Councillor Berman was cutting a ribbon for me, I was at Robert Hogg's retirement, 35 years as a volunteer firefighter, and I know he will be missed on Tuesday nights because he's been a fixture there for 35 years, and so it was wonderful to hand Robert his certificate and congratulate him on that, on those years of dedication. Today I gave a certificate to Gerald McCullough, who was celebrating his 102nd birthday. He's a resident of Chartwell Georgian Traditions Home, and he was born in 1917, just as the First World War ended. So he's seen quite a span of time, and when he came to Canada, he had the incredible privilege and interesting encounter to be working for the Avro Aero. And when it closed down, he continued to work for Boeing, or whoever it was, and went on to develop the Concorde engine. But very interesting man, and happy birthday to Gerald. One other quick point, the Hockey for Hope, I think Councillor McLeod is going to be held at the Eddie Bush. So I've got tickets here, and it will be on the Eddie Bush, and it's still the same great event, so we look forward to seeing you there, and it is in support of my friend's house. So it's a great event if you have time to drop by, and if you are a hockey enthusiast, as I was, I had 3 boys that went through CCI. Hockey Day in Collingwood this coming Wednesday is actually a spectacular program that starts with the elementary schools in the morning and goes right through to the high school girls and boys games, which pitch CCI against Sean Vanier. They've got the drum line there, and it's quite a fantastic event. So I encourage everyone to get out and attend that. And those are my announcements. So Adam, I will quickly turn to you just to take us through the live streaming so that our audience has an idea of what they need to do when we come out of, when we go in camera, and if they want to see the Rise and Report. Thank you.
Sure. Through your worship, if residents can go to collingwood.ca and scroll to the very bottom of the website, the main page of the website, you'll see a button here called Council Livestream. If you click that, it will open YouTube and will play a live stream of this council meeting. Actually, it'll show the video where it says live now, and if you click that, it'll open up and play the current live stream.
Good. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to deputations, and we have an update from the Collingwood Youth Centre and the Rotary Club of Collingwood South Georgian Bay, so I'll call that crowd forward.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Abby Steck, and I'm the Director of Development of Business at Elephant Thoughts Educational Outreach, and I'm also on the executive of the Collingwood Youth Centre. Mayor Sanderson, thank you so much, and council and staff for having us here tonight for this exciting update. Before I start, because we do have new council members, I thought I would give you the Coles notes of how the Collingwood Youth Centre got started. It was at the thoughts of Ray Smith, who was honored yesterday at the levee. He had envisioned when he built the Collingwood Youth Centre that it would be a beehive of activity for youth in the community. And unfortunately, the first couple of years didn't happen that way. And then there was a perfect storm of a whole bunch of ideas that came together in order to facilitate starting the Collingwood Youth Centre as it stands today. The South Georgian Bay Rotary Club came together with a $75,000 legacy fund that they donated for the renovations for the building. Elephant Thoughts and the Environment Network came together to manage the youth center. The town of Collingwood came together with funds as well, and it has been in my career certainly the most successful and amazing collaboration because we constantly work with each other every day. The things that are going on at the youth center right now are having a huge impact in our community. The original mandate was for economic development, and I can certainly say that there have been a lot of grants that have come through the youth center for skill building, connecting youth to medium to small sized businesses in the community so that they have an anchor in the community to come back to after post-secondary. Just a couple of highlights. The Skills Catalyst grant involved carpentry, welding, culinary, and adventure tourism. We had employer partners with the town of Blue Mountains and some local businesses in order to facilitate the grant. And another grant that you'll hear about coming out is the Service Corps grant, which is a flagship program for the Prime Minister. And he is trying to teach the next generation of youth all about service work and the value of service work and giving back to your community. So instead of youth over the next 15 months in Collingwood getting just the 40 hours of community service that they would normally get at high school, we'll be initiating a program out of the youth center where they will, by getting skills in the community and improving their employability, they will be getting 120 hours of community service in the next 15 months. So without further ado, I have two amazing stars here. I have John Saul from the South Georgian Bay Rotary, and first of all, I have JJ Cardello, who is an upcoming star in the community, and he's going to tell you about some of the initiatives that he's working on.
Hello, Council. Thank you very much for having us, Mr. Mayor and staff. My name is JJ Cardillo, or John Cardillo Jr. I am a 12th grade student at Collingwood Collegiate, and I am the leader of the Collingwood Youth Center Film Production Club. Now last year, with the unfortunate canceling of the CCI musical, myself and some fellow students at CCI put together the first ever feature-length film in all of Canadian film history done entirely by high school students. We wrote an 88-page screenplay, held auditions, and filmed this movie all over Collingwood and the Georgian area. We involved not only our core group of students, but the project as far as crew, as far as cast on screen. We had over 125 students from 5 local schools be part of this project and volunteer their time to this project. That leads me to the Collingwood Youth Center. Now, I've been working with the Youth Center since about September, and I helped, pardon me, I'm dealing with a bit of a cold. I helped found the production club. Now, this club originally started as an idea between myself and Lee Pankhurst, and it has since grown to feature 20 students every single week come devote their time and their energy to producing original content for not only just for the Youth Center, but for the Collingwood community. And we have currently a few major projects that we're undertaking, but specifically we're working on a youth homelessness documentary. Now this documentary is going to be about 20 to 25 minutes in length, and it's going to showcase the issues of youth homelessness that are very real and very prevalent in our small town. And this is a project that isn't coming from my lips, and I'm not speaking about it. We are interviewing students at CCI, students at Jean Vanier, kids that have gone through this or that are going through this, whether they're in Home Horizons and that's where they are, whether they've had to spend their nights at Tim Hortons or in between the doors of a TD Bank. And we're really telling their stories and showing why we need to make the conscious and active effort in changing that. The next project we're working on is a second feature-length film. Now, these films aren't happening in Toronto or in Montreal where they're really production hubs of Canada. This is happening in Collingwood. Now, we are working on putting together the second feature-length film created entirely by high school students in Canadian film history. And we are looking to involve students from all over the community and from every school in the area in this project. And this project is coming straight out of the Collingwood Youth Centre. Now, beyond just the Youth Centre, we want to make it a community project. Not so much a school project, but really a community project where it's the students and the children and the youth of Collingwood putting forth their time and their effort into this project. Our first film was shown at the Gaiety for 3 nights, and all the funds from it were donated to my friend's house. This year, what we want to do is donate half the funds to my friend's house, and the other half of the funds we're going to donate to a program that we're in the process of starting up that'll go to help homeless youth in the community, whether that's establishing emergency housing or helping provide them the services and goods that they need in their times of need. Our intention is to show the film at the Gaiety Theatre for 3 nights, along with the documentary as its lead-in. And that's coming all straight out of the production club and out of the Collingwood Youth Centre. It's been wonderful to have students come in and amass large amounts of their time. I personally spent probably over 100 hours putting into this club, into the Youth Centre, and it's truly been a wonderful thing for myself, but also a wonderful thing for all of us to be a part of. I'm going to now pass it over to John, as he's going to conclude the rest of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, if that isn't energy, I don't know what is, but I can tell you that the CYC is a place of energy. Thanks to the town for its contribution to our contribution to get the CYC back up and running. Mayor Saunderson, the rest of town council and staff, thanks for having us today. There is a significant amount of information on that slide that you can see in front of you. It's the clearest part of that is it's up. Everything is up at CYC. Drop-in visits, drop-in hours, volunteer hours, programming that you just heard about. It's a significant contribution to this community, and we're really proud to be part of the sustainability factor. We have to keep this thing going. And so, we have a fundraiser. Rotary has rebranded our Give Your Heart to Rotary Radiothon to Rotary for Kids. And if we could just skip to the next slide. What is it? It is a 12-hour party, essentially, at the Youth Centre. It'll be in the parking lot, it'll be in the building. I know it's the middle of February, but Napoleon Home Comfort is our major sponsor. They've brought gigantic warming center equipment, so it'll be a party all day on First Street as we broadcast for the 12 hours. How can you participate? Well, through our website. We are also running a silent auction. You can bid for some terrific items, and our goal this year is to raise $25,000. So we've significantly contributed to the local charities in the last couple of years through our radiothon, but this year we're hoping to do a lot more. And if you could just go to the next slide, the big question is, what can you do? Well, you can listen to the peak, and if you listen to it from the end of this week all the way up to February the 14th, which is the day of the event, they'll be talking about our auction site, they'll be talking about various things like this up and coming film production, all the other programs that CYC is running, and you can pledge donations throughout that time frame. And then come to the CYC on the day of the 14th. Come and join the party. I think you'll be as enthusiastic as I am every time I walk into that building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions? Council Madigan.
Thank you, sir. Through you to Mr. Cardillo. Good job, great presentation. Who funds these films?
So as far as the funding for the films, last year's film, everything was out of pocket, which for high school students can be a little pricey. But this year's film, we're really looking to expand that and to put a lot more, into this movie. So our intention is to look for whether it is grants, whether it is any kinds of donations to the film itself. We have a plan in place to bring together some local businesses in Collingwood. Our intention is to film potentially different scenes, different aspects of the film at restaurants, at coffee shops, clothing stores, and potentially set up some kind of form of donation to the film. So along with not only just the promotion of the business by being in the film, the business would also get a marquee billing on the posters for the movie. And before the film starts, as the pre-roll goes, we'd feature the logos as well as a URL to the website as to where you can go to visit these businesses. And that'll come as almost a tiered donation system to donating money to the project, so we can afford, costumes, so we can afford different types of equipment, so we can make this movie the best it possibly can be, and an honest representation of the students of Collingwood, because there are a lot of very, very passionate students here that haven't had the ability to show off their skills, and some that had no idea they wanted to go into film a couple months ago. We brought them into the Collingwood Youth Center, and just a couple days ago, a friend of mine got accepted into a film studies program at York University, and they had no idea about 6 months ago they wanted to be in that. So as far as with this movie, that's our intention for budgeting. And I forgot to say beforehand, the movie is called Failing with Flying Colors. So yeah, thank you very much.
Council Madigan.
If you could just keep you there, what did the first film cost to make? So what budget are you looking for within this fantastic community that we live in? And I know that every business out there is going to want to donate to this.
Absolutely. The first film cost probably around $3,000 to make, and that was $3,000 out of pocket, not including the how much it was to rent out the Gaiety Theatre. And that came all out of pocket. This year we're looking for a more increased budget for the film. I would like, if possible, for aiming towards about a $10,000 budget for the film. That would equate for costumes, advertising, printing of posters, online advertising, as well as different kinds of, if we need props, if we need sets, if we need to pay for the use of any areas, whatever that might be, and especially equipment. We want to make this movie pop. Last year's film we got a lot of great reception from it, as it blew people away, because when you think of a student film, you don't think of something too glamorous, but last year's was just a peek of what we can do, and this year we want to really knock your socks off.
Excellent, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much and good luck with it.
Thank you.
All right, who would have the consent agenda?
I have the first item, Your Worship. Moved by me, Councillor Comey, and seconded by Councillor Doherty, that the consent agenda, having been given due consideration by council, be received.
Yes, if you can just go quickly over the items, that'd be great, please.
Ronnie Gepsey, President and CEO, Ontario Trillium Gift of Life Network, organ and tissue donation and transplantation in Collingwood update, December 2018. City of Hamilton motion maintaining the voters list for municipal elections. Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, read feedback for housing supply action plan.
Thank you. Council, I'll call the vote on accepting the consent agenda. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Are there any items the council would like to pull? All right. Oh, sorry, Councillor Jeffrey?
Mayor Saunders, I thought there was a motion for one, I think A2, there was a motion prepared for that consent agenda, so I wouldn't need to pull if we already have a motion, or we'll pull, so we can consider the motion.
Yeah, we do have a motion. I think Councillor Comey has it. If you want to pull item 2, then Councillor Jeffrey, you can speak to it. Great.
I think that the motion will be self-explanatory if Councillor Comey wants to just, but I think it's important to make that list as accurate and as usable, friendly user as possible, and to be as accurate as possible as we can, so I think the motion will speak to that.
Okay, so we're pulling item 2, which is the City of Hamilton motion maintaining the voters list for municipal elections. And maybe we'll pass it to Clerk Almus just to give some background as to what the issues are.
Certainly through yourself to members of council and the public, this piece of correspondence from the City of Hamilton actually identifies some of the significant issues that they faced through their municipal election process. We were a little bit different. We didn't have some of the complications that they had. However, there is always a certain amount of issues that do arise with the municipal elections voters list. One issue in particular is the sharing commitment that the province, the federal government as well, have with municipal voters lists. So I think that the resurgence of that stakeholders group would be very important. I know for the town of Collingwood that we actually have a software program that we implement every year so that we can do an annual update regularly and not leave it till the very end. However, I think that this is something that the town could support easy enough, and the stakeholder group would be beneficial, I think, to all municipalities.
So what I will do is ask Councillor Comey if you can read the motion in.
Be it resolved that council support the City of Hamilton in its statements and efforts to make improvements to the municipal voters list for the 2022 municipal and school board elections, and further that the council supports the re-establishment of the multi-stakeholder working group between the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, Ministry of Finance, AMCTO, MPAC, Elections Canada, and Elections Ontario in exploring and identifying ways to create and maintain the voters list for municipal elections. Moved by me, Councillor Comey, and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey.
Great, thank you. Questions and comments, Council? Seeing none, then I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is passed unanimously. Before we move on from the consent agenda, I'm going to pass the chair to the Deputy Mayor, because I'd like to pull item 3, which is the letter from Minister Clark with respect to the municipal input for the Housing Supply Action Plan. There's quite a tight deadline of January 25, 2019, but it's part of a consultation that will be looking at a review of all aspects of development approved processes as they relate to building more housing people can afford and attract and retaining new business investments. So I was just going to ask staff, Nancy, Director Ferrara, if we're planning to take this opportunity to make give some input to the province on this initiative.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. The letter, I believe, also says something about that they will be in contact with us further. And so far that we haven't heard anything from them, but we can certainly write to them no matter what. It sort of gives the impression that they will be getting a hold of us as well. We can certainly have a discussion at Development and Operations about what our comments might be, and we can bring those up next week because that would still be time to get there on the 25th.
Great, that'd be appreciated. I don't think we need to do anything more with that. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. All right, we'll get into staff reports then. We don't have any reports or minutes of other committees or boards, so we will go to the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee. I think you have these reports, Deputy Mayor, so I'll pass it over to you.
I do, Mayor Saunderson, and just for clarity before I read out the first one, this will be for the opt-in and then we'll proceed with that and opt out if required.
Very good.
Declaring? Okay. So, Your Worship, moved by me, seconded by Councillor Comey, be it resolved that the Council receives staff report number C 2019-01 entitled Consideration of Cannabis Retail Stores in Collingwood for Information Purposes, and herein authorize the following. The Council herein opt in as a municipality that will permit cannabis retail stores and authorize the clerk to advise the AGCO registrar, and the Council approve the municipal cannabis policy statement as attached. And further, the Council delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Building Services to coordinate and respond to cannabis retail store applications from the AGCO pursuant to the approved policy matters deemed appropriate through a consultative process.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. There's been a lot of discussion. This has been an issue we've seen on the horizon for quite a while. And before we get around to table comments, we had an SIC meeting last week in which we had a number of comments from the public, and I'm just going to turn to the clerk and ask Clerk Amos to outline the public consultation that we have undergone so far, and then we'll take comments from the council.
Certainly, through Your Worship, to members of council and the public, we did have, actually the basis of our last meeting at the SIC was regarding receiving our last bit of public consultation for cannabis retail outlets in Collingwood. So just as a bit of a background, on September 27th is when the province introduced new legislation regarding privatizing cannabis retailers. And in that piece of legislation, they gave municipalities until January the 22nd, 2019 as a deadline if they choose to opt out of allowing retail cannabis stores within their jurisdiction. So council did request that staff undertake a detailed consultation process. And the consultation included putting together an internal staff task force to lead the conversations with the public and our stakeholders. We held stakeholder consultations with a number of agencies. We conducted a public survey. This public survey was actually open and available to the public for approximately 1 month, and we had a significant turnout for that survey. We had 1,400 respondents, actually over 1,400 respondents, and in that survey, over 77% of the respondents indicated that they support having retail outlets within the town of Collingwood. Again, we only had one other detailed survey process that was undertaken, which included Parks, Rec and Culture and their waterfront master plan development. It was open for a period of 6 months and received 200 individuals responding, so we were quite satisfied with the response that we did receive. We participated with a Chamber of Commerce event that they held, providing further information to the public and businesses regarding retail outlets within Collingwood. And during that meeting of the SIC on January the 7th, we received 7 more individuals coming forward to speak about retail outlets. Only one individual at that point requested that council consider opting out to allow a further review of the legislation and public consultation pieces to that until more legislation is made available and clearer. So basically, we took these comments together with some comments that the committee had provided, and we provided some amendments within the staff report that are presented within your agenda package. So all the comments from the public are provided, as well as we've introduced correspondence that had been provided in addition to the correspondence that was received and incorporated in that original document. We've refined our municipal cannabis policy statement to include a 200-meter buffer around schools, as well as parks. And this basically came from a survey question that we had during the consultation piece about concerns that the public have with proximity to various sensitive land uses or activities. So we understand in reviewing the city of Barrie, they had requested a 300-meter buffer. In our consultation directly with the school board indicated that they felt 150 was not significant enough. So in looking together with staff and our Director of Planning and Building Services, 200 meters is a approximately the distance of 1 block within the town of Collingwood. So we looked at creating a buffer, knowing again that the AGCO is only taking our comments under consideration, that they have final approval rights. We don't even receive formal notification from the AGCO if there is an application that's put forward for a retail outlet within our municipality. Again, I should preface this by saying that there was another amendment to the regulations in December that indicated regardless, Collingwood would not be able to host a municipality within the first phase because you have to be a municipality of a population greater than 50,000, as well as they have designated only 5 regions within the province, and each region was designated 5 license application areas where stores could be located. So that lottery actually happened last week and the results have been announced. In addition to the 200-meter buffer, we also have the question regarding the sharing of costs, because if a municipality opts in and allows retail cannabis outlets within their municipality, they're now become eligible to receive the additional provincial funding. So with the additional provincial funding, that funding is to be split 50-50 with your upper tier municipality. And the question came, has there been any negotiations? I think Mayor Saunderson might be able to also shed some light at the county regarding that conversation.
Certainly, I'll just give myself some clear distance from the water cups. Yes, there was a discussion down at the county in our preliminary budget with the committee of the whole the other day, and I raised the question with Trevor Wilcox, the treasurer or director of finance for the county. It is a 50-50 cost share arrangement as basically set out by the province. However, the county is putting the money in reserve and is quite prepared to look at renegotiating that cost sharing arrangement depending how things play out when we start to have to implement this, looking at all costs, and it will also depend, I think, in large part on, in terms of the funding that is available. As municipalities opt out, they won't be entitled to funding, so the pot may shrink. So it is something the county is prepared to look at, but right now, as in many aspects of this whole cannabis legalization, it's up for speculation. And I just wanted to clarify one thing with the clerk. When we're talking about the policy statement, the buffer zone, that relates to retail outlets. It doesn't relate to actually smoking.
That is correct.
And that the smoking would come under, we can affect that by our municipal smoking bylaw, and I know that the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit is working on recommendations for smoking bylaws that will take into consideration the new cannabis legislation.
That is correct.
Okay.
So on this map, we actually have identified the 200-meter buffer. We've also did the lay, you can see the commercial zones in the, I guess, rosy pink color as well as the yellowy orange color. So those are where cannabis retail outlets, if the council decides this evening that you will opt in and permit them within our municipality, they can be permitted within only those areas. And within our policy statement, and again, the policy statement is a template that AMO, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, has provided to municipalities to give us a little bit of guidance if council delegates authority, because the window of commenting once a retail outlet application has been received by the AGCO is only 15 days. So if council delegates the authority to staff, the policy statement gives some framework around what comments should be focused on. So again, this shows the schools and the parks with the 200-meter distance, as well as the commercial zones where cannabis retail outlets could be permitted.
Thank you very much for that thorough report. I'll now open comments, questions around the table. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I'm wondering, first of all, if we could sever the recommendation just to separate out the policy statement segment so that we can speak to simply the opt-in first, but I'd like to speak separately to the policy statement.
Right, so there's 3 parts to the motion. You're
just pulling out,
just separating, pulling out in the middle. Okay, that's fine.
Right, thank you. And then I guess my first question, I agree with staff's recommendation, the 200-meter buffer. I was wondering, and I had asked the question earlier about the Eddie Bush not being marked with a buffer in terms of the location of a retail outlet. And I guess what I hadn't noticed when staff did the reply, also the library had not been documented on the map as well.
Quick comments for that?
Certainly, through your worship to Councillor Jeffrey, council and the public, in reviewing the different areas, the biggest concern, even during our stakeholder consultation with the various agencies, like the health unit, emergency services, the OPP, fire services, whatnot, the concern was more around the consumption and the use issue versus the proximity of retail. So in the conversations with our Parks Rec and Culture Department, specifically with Director Culver, as well as with the Library Chief Executive Officer, Ken Haig, they indicated that they did not feel that at this point there would be any concern with having retail outlets close to those facilities, as it is more important, the consumption and use is more what they wanted to focus their comments on. So other than that, and unfortunately, Director Culver provides his regrets this evening.
Okay, I'm just going to listen to maybe some other comments, and I may or may not decide on an amendment or ask for a vote on an amendment.
Okay, good. Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking in favor of the motion that Deputy Mayor Hall has read this evening, and I have three brief points I'd like to make. The first one is our federal government has decided to make cannabis legal, and I believe we have an obligation to make sure that the quality of what's provided is safe, and we will only know that that's happening if retail stores are allowed in our community. I also believe that we have an obligation to make sure that it can be acquired in a safe place, and not everyone is able to make avail of online purchasing for various reasons, some of which are detailed in the staff report. So I would like to see retail stores available so that we have a safe quality, a safe place, and get the sale of this product out of, I'll say, the back alleys of our community. Secondly, I have been worried over the last number of months that as a small community, Collingwood shouldn't be on the forefront of having retail stores, because for sure, and we've seen it in spades, as our provincial bureaucracy is rolling this program out, there's a lot of learning on the ground and there's going to be a lot of changes, and I was worried that our community would be bearing the cost, not only in staff time, but lots of other costs as things change. But I understand that we are not going to get a retail store anytime soon, and after these first 25 stores are up and running, we won't see any before the end of December 2019. So that's a good 8 months that we'll see stores in operation, and who knows if even we'll be in the next grouping of stores that are allowed. So I feel that that is good for us to not be in the first round. And lastly, I just wanted to thank staff for beefing up the cannabis retail policy statement to reflect some of the issues out of the survey, and to list the more other sensitive uses other than schools. And I see that what has been listed since our last meeting are registered daycares, addiction centers, shelters, playgrounds, and parks. And that the increase, as Clerk Almas mentioned, to 200 meters, I also support that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maddox.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. I echo Councillor Hamlin's comments about the federal government. They've made it legal. It's our obligation as a community to follow the laws of our federal government. And secondly, 77% of the people in Collingwood want it. Whether people came and took part in it through a very eloquent presentation by our clerk, 1,420 people did. So the people have spoken. I'm not, as I've said before, for or against recreational use, but I will always, as a retailer, vote for free enterprise. And if we don't do this, people are still going to get marijuana through the mail, through off websites, and the social ill wills are still going to be here. And if we don't opt in, we will not get the funding, and there's still going to be marijuana within our community, as there has been for many, many, many decades. So we're not selling our soul, but we are gonna need the funding to help facilitate some of the issues moving forward. So as I said, it is legal. We've had a great debate over this. 77% of the people in Collingwood wanted who took part, and I would be asking for a recorded vote on this, please, and thank you.
Other comments? Councillor McLeod.
Through your worship, and I'm not entirely sure to whom to direct this question, and I have two of them. What weight does our policy statement have when it comes to the province? They're saying 150 meters. I mean, we can say 1,000 meters if we want to. Does it matter that we have that included in the statement? Do they have to listen to us when we say that?
I think the short answer is no, but I'm going to pass that through to the clerk.
Okay. The second question that I have is when might we expect to see some bylaw amendments and that sort of thing regarding signage when it comes to consumption of cannabis on the streets? I was walking down here, Ontario, this morning, and that was not leaves they were burning.
Yeah, so I'm going to pass it through the clerk, but I can tell you that the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit is working on this. I think it would be wise for us to get input from other agencies, particularly the health unit, because they are a large proponent of the Smoke-Free Ontario Act and have done a lot of work in this area. And I know, having sat on the health unit for the last 4 years, this has been something they've been working on. So they are in the process of working on this, and I think it's a two-part question in terms of the timing. One is when do you amend your bylaw, but also how you need to have enforcement in place. And so I think the enforcement is a big concern, and I'm just going to turn quickly to the CAO. My understanding is we're looking at a governance review, and I hope that in that process we might look at beefing up how our bylaw capacity to enforce the changes to the smoking bylaw when it comes through.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, that's correct. And to answer the question directly, I mean, I think we're probably looking at sometime in the spring to bring forward recommendations dealing with signage and smoking. And on the governance piece, which is a report that is outstanding, we're hoping to bring that forward to SIC sometime in February or March to sort of coincide shortly after the budget deliberations.
Thank you very much. My comment, I suppose, to that will be that will be 6 months after cannabis became legal to walk around, and it wasn't a surprise that that was coming. I'm just wondering why the holdup, why we didn't have this in place on October 17th.
Well, I mean, through you, Your Worship, I mean, this has been sort of a moving target, and clarity on the number of stores, the regulation have been changing, and I think it's only recently that there have been some certainty attached to the actual rollout of this policy. So we're going to be working as quickly and as diligently and as expeditiously as we can to try and bring this forward as quickly as we can. But I think it is important that we coordinate whatever we do with the health authority, and also that we make sure that we've got the requisite enforcement resources in place so that we can put forward a regulation that has the teeth behind it, which would be the enforcement aspect of it. So that's the reason why the actual signage and policy is not in there.
Thomas?
Certainly, just to follow up on CAO Min's comments, right now the whole signage component is all the responsibility of the health unit. So, because it's all under the Smoke-Free Ontario Act right now, so the smoking tobacco, vaping, or the use of cannabis is all regulated under the province at this point, unless we get further, when we review the smoking bylaw and we want to look at enhancing our other opportunities, that's when municipality will be responsible for our own signage in our own areas. But right now, they've provided us stickers to provide over top of existing signage. There are also who businesses should go to, because vehicles and business owners have to have the no smoking sign on washrooms and within their areas. So it's the health unit that's currently responsible.
Thank you so much.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship. I also will lend my voice in support of this recommendation for the reasons really that other members of council have already cited. A, that cannabis is now legal, B, that we need to ensure the quality and the safety of the product that our citizens have access to and the safety of access. Number 3, because the community has overwhelmingly supported the availability of retail stores in our town. We have protected sensitive services via this recommendation. And finally, this allows us to participate in the funds that will be disseminated from the province.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you to Director Farrar, I believe 2 quick questions. Number 1, with only 15 days from the date of submission of a location to submit any concerns, does that allow any time for public input?
Yes, through Mayor Cooper to Councillor Berman, probably not in the grand scheme of things. What staff would be doing would be that we would be meeting, there'd probably be several department heads that would meet internally, and we would review the location, and we would comment to the AGCO on our thoughts as to whether we felt the proposed location was appropriate or not. These locations will be, I mean, it's not just us who will be commenting, it's not just staff. It will also be other members of the public. If they're watching the website, they will also have the option to submit their own comments individually, but it really doesn't leave time for any kind of a public consultation process run by the town.
Thank you. And it doesn't really help that the municipality won't be directly notified when there's an application. My second question, just as an example, to do with the map, I keep coming back to the vacant Max Milk that's at the corner of Oak and 6th as an example. That's, I think, arguably in the middle of a residential area, but there's nothing to stop a store from being located there, is there?
Through the mayor to Councillor Berman, it's not an area where we would be recommending that would be an appropriate location for a store. It would be staff's view generally that we're supporting the C1, C2 areas as being more appropriate locations for stores. That is not in either a C1 or C2. So our recommendation to the AGCO would be that would not be an appropriate location because frankly it is the middle of a residential area. But as I think as Clerk Almas has said, that's a recommendation of staff. There's no requirement that the AGCO listen to what we particularly have to say to them, but that would be part of our comments.
Thank you. Yeah, I will be voting to opt in, but that's part of my concern is the lack of control that we have after we do so. Thank you.
So any other comments before we close? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to perhaps the rest of council, it would appear based on the comments that we'll have a majority supporting to opt in. And I would just like to thank members of council and thank our staff and thank members of the community for the level of engagement on this particular issue. Last week at our strategic initiatives meeting, I made a few comments. One of the comments, and I used the term half-assed, and it was in the context as it related to the legislation that was proposed and then passed by the current federal government and now being implemented nationwide by our provincial governments and territories. And I have followed politics for decades as a level of interest, and I can't think of another piece of legislation that quite frankly has been mishandled since day one from the top coming down and has put the onus on municipalities, the 444 municipalities across the province to deal with these issues and to ask these types of questions to have answered with a degree of certainty, but at the same time that there are some loose ends that cannot be answered at this time. I feel that we are voting on something with the best information available today, but it remains to be seen what our provincial government does, what the AGCO does moving ahead, And I simply look at the distribution and sales of alcohol as an example, where only a couple of years ago could you purchase alcohol through the beer store for beer, alcohol through the LCBO, and of course that landscape has changed where now you can purchase beer through the LCBO, you can purchase beer through your local grocery stores, and in fact the provincial government is looking today to expand that beyond to big box stores, etc. So it won't surprise me that the best available information that we're dealing with tonight will change in very short order, and that in fact, maybe in 6 months to a year, we'll be looking at a very different landscape as it relates to the sale of cannabis in retail stores. And the last thing I would just mention specific to the legislation and the trickle down is that I found it of interest that the provincial government held their lottery, and that 25 names from, I think it was 1,700 submissions were drawn, and it was it's quite possible that, for example, one of the winning proprietors that was drawn may in fact actually want to open up a business in a large municipality that may in fact actually opt out tonight. And it just goes to show you that, you know, we're dealing with a policy that's been put in place, and quite frankly, there's been a lot of the horse put in, or the cart in front of the horse, and vice versa. And it hasn't had maybe the fluid fallout, or not fallout, but fluid follow through from top to bottom that maybe this should have had, given that I think that most people in the community have a vested interest in you know, seeing a product that's now legal, safely sold and distributed through the community in a proper manner. Anyways, so I will leave it by just saying once again that I commend the council for doing the due diligence, and it would appear that there is support for this, and in particular for the staff for the hours of work that, in my opinion, had the province done their work, would not have been necessary, and most importantly to the level of engagement for the community in coming out and showing where they thought we best should move forward in this direction.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
One last comment.
Councilor Madigan, before you go, I'm going to make my own comments, and then I'll
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Through you, just to the public, just to assure you that, and I don't think people are going to have a real issue with having a store, a brick and mortar in Collingwood. I think the concern is where the product is going to be used. And I think through you to the clerk that we can assure the public that through our own smoking bylaws, we can protect the community from any throwback to Woodstock 1969 concert energy up and down the streets of Collingwood, just for our own bylaws that won't be affected by the AGCO, nor will the implementation of making marijuana legal. Is that correct?
It is correct, but I'll pass it through there. Good. Okay, so before I call the vote, there are a few comments that I'd like to make, and I think council's, first of all, I would like to thank staff for the excellent report, and I think the vote tonight will be very much guided by the high level of engagement we've received from the public. It, I think, has been overwhelming, the response, but B, also the preference of our residents. Having said that, I take all the comments from around the table and those of the Deputy Mayor about the actual process. This is legislation that emanated from the federal government and then came down to a provincial government, which has since changed. So there's been really 3 changes in the regime about how it was going to be implemented from the time the Wynne government put it in place to after the election, and how it got modified any number of times and may still be modified. But the best evidence before us today, I think, supports the opting in decision in the sense that it does ensure a safe supply for what is now a legal product in Canada. It does ensure a safe place of purchase, and as well provides us with a funding source that we may use, because we know that I think the cost for the municipality and all municipalities will go far beyond just the enforcement, which is a 2-pronged process from the actual bylaw to the bylaw enforcement, but also to other aspects, which can be something as simple as the building code. If you have a 4-plex and you have 4 residents who are all entitled to grow 4 plants, that's 16 plants, and at what point in time does mold become an issue? And those types of issues can have building code effects, safety effects, and also marketability effects for those homeowners. So there are many issues, I think, that will probably be what we call the unintended results, and we'll have to see how those play out. But right now, from the landscape we know, I think this council's making a responsible decision, and I am happy that we did not make a knee-jerk decision early on in the process, because I think we would have made a different one if we sat around this table 2 months ago. So with that being said, I'm going to turn to the clerk for the recorded vote. Oh, sorry. Councilor Jeffrey.
Just point of clarification.
Yeah.
I just wondered if I wanted to test an amendment to include the arena as a sensitive use and to have the buffer, would that be done under the policy statement, or would it be done under the opt-in?
I'm going to pass that to the clerk. My understanding is, and the clerk brought this to my attention, we're really going to have to sever it into 2 motions, one for just the first paragraph about opting in, and the second with respect to the policy statement, because the 3rd paragraph also includes aspects of the policy statement. So the vote I'm calling right now is just with respect to the 1st paragraph only, and that is that council herein opt in as a municipality that will permit cannabis retail stores and authorize the clerk to advise the AGCO registrar. That's what we're voting on at this point in time. We will then subsequently vote in the second aspect, in which you can bring your motion forward, your amendment forward, and we will deal with that before we get back to this if you have a seconder. Okay? So that being said, then I'm going to turn to the clerk.
Certainly a recording vote has been requested. All those in favor, please rise. Thank you. You may be seated. Voted. It's carried unanimous.
Now then, Councillor Jeffrey, we're now dealing with the second 2 paragraphs of option 1. And did you have an amendment to make?
I do have an amendment. I'd like to move that we include the Eddie Bush Memorial Arena as a sensitive use with buffering within our mapping.
I don't think that's a friendly motion given the extent of it.
It's an addition.
It's an additional motion, so it's an amendment of itself. Can we pull up the overlay map, please?
Certainly, through your worship, to members of council. Another reason to specifically with the Eddie Bush Memorial Arena was one of the items that wasn't included in the buffer, because that would remove a significant component of the downtown. Because it would include the 200 meter buffer from the entire property, because it's from the edge of the property and 200 meters out. So I just wanted to add that for your consideration.
Thank you. I'll ask if you have a seconder, Councillor Jeffrey, for that.
A couple.
Councillor Doherty? All right. Then we'll put that amendment discussion on the floor. Comments? Councillor Coleman?
Thank you. Through your worship to Clerk Alma, could you kindly clarify, I think you mentioned that Director Culver had said he did not require this buffer, that this did go in for consultation? Can I?
You want to speak to your motion, your amendment?
I'll speak once.
Please, okay, and I'll go to Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. I would second that motion in that while it is excluding a proportion of the downtown retail area, there still does remain a significant portion of the downtown retail district that would qualify for a cannabis outlet, while protecting the kinds of patrons that we see at Eddie Bush, which are in many cases youth.
Are we able to put the green or the gray bubble around if we were to include the Eddie Bush, or is it something we can do on the fly?
We just have to visually imagine. Maybe are you able to zoom in a little bit more?
So my understanding is we said it would essentially be one city block. Is that correct?
Correct.
So it would go 1 block back from the Eddie Bush and 1 block north and south of the Eddie Bush.
And across the street.
And yes, and across the street. So effectively block out. Okay, so we're getting it in there. That may be too big. Is that what it's gonna block out? While I'm doing that, are there any comments around the table? Councilor McCaw.
To reiterate the question that I asked earlier, we can put up all the boundaries and buffers and dreams and hopes that we want, and the province is still going to do whatever the province is going to do? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct in terms of the retail buffer. What we have control of more so is our smoking bylaws, which is the consumption. And I would turn to the clerk in terms of the smoking, the existing smoking bylaw around the Eddie Bush. What area are we allowed to prohibit there under our current smoking bylaw?
Certainly, right now, it's 9 meters from a public entrance. So however, you can't restrict or prohibit smoking on a public sidewalk if it forms part of the boulevard, which is part of the highway.
And is that subject to change if this council looks at our smoking bylaw?
Sorry, through your worship, members of council, the restriction on the sidewalk is a provincial matter, so that is something that previous councils had actually petitioned the province to request a review of that. That has not happened to date. However, staff will obviously be considering that within our report, and whether we have to make a further petition to the province to amend the legislation to allow municipalities to have that ability with this new cannabis legislation. That's something that we'll consider in that report.
Okay, Councillor Jeffrey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess the other facilities such as the Central Park Arena and the soccer pitches all got captured within parklands, and this is where the Eddie Bush was an exception. And I think that if we think those are also sensitive uses, I don't know why we'd ignore. Understanding that we're simply making a statement and wishing and praying that the powers to be will see our rationale for the request. If you don't make it, then they're not going to see it. So if we're going to include the others, I really believe strongly that we need to include the Eddie Bush as, and it will cover out, I'm assuming, the library, so I really don't have to go into that. But I do believe that we need to be consistent in our approach. So that's specific to the amendment. I have some other questions on the whole thing, but that's specific to the amendment.
Okay, maybe I can ask, because this question flows from what you just said. Director Farrar, the Central Park Arena and the pool facilities, are they in commercial districts?
Yes, to Mayor Saunderson, no, neither of those are in commercial districts. They're both in recreation areas. So they're surrounded by parkland and areas that are designated parkland.
So it's not, they're not coming under the sensitive exemption, they're coming in because they are outside of commercial use.
They are outside of commercial uses, yes, sir.
Can I ask a question to that then? Thank you. Hume Street's commercial, is it not?
Director Farrar?
Yes, Mayor Saunderson, through you to Councillor Jeffrey. Hume Street is commercial, but where the actual arena is located is within a parkland.
That's what I'm saying.
So the parkland qualifies for the sensitive use. Is that the distinction there? Okay. So on one hand, it's outside the commercial district, but on the other, it's inside, but it falls within what we're considering a sensitive use because it's parkland. Okay. And your motion, Councillor Jeffrey, is to extend that sensitive use to the Eddie Bush. Okay. Any other questions around the table? Did you want to speak to any other aspect of it before, or you wanted to?
Not to the amendment, no, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate what Councillor Jeffrey is putting forward on the table, although I don't necessarily support it. And I think it speaks to my comments earlier this evening and to my comments last week in the sense that we are trying to put together a policy, our best foot forward, when we have such discrepancies as it relates to various legal products, whether it be tobacco, whether it be alcohol, whether it be cannabis. I think that what I would rather see happen is that we move forward with what is recommended by staff tonight, and that at a later date, we as a council come back and we really work at a policy update as it relates to the enforcement in terms of where you can and can't use these products, and how we go about enforcing them. Because quite frankly, cannabis aside, we've got some discrepancies within our own policies, for example, or within the health unit's policies. And I'll give you one example, and that is that smoking is prohibited within parkland and within a certain distance of entry points to municipal facilities, Central Park Arena being one of them, and yet we've got an ashtray just outside of the entry point to the arena. It's a contradiction. In terms of where you can buy some of these products, and Councillor Madigan, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think if I heard you correctly, and I agree with what you're saying, the concerns that we did hear, or what residents' concerns are not necessarily the sale of the product within a particular location, or the consumption of the product throughout the municipality. And so therefore, just for the sake of being able to move forward, I would like to see us just move forward with what has been presented by staff as it relates to the policy statement, recommendations for the AGCO, and that we come back as a council at a later date and we revisit our policies as it relates to the consumption of product.
Thank you. Councillor Madigan.
I'll keep it simple. I support Councillor Jeffrey's motion wholeheartedly. There's lots of kids going in and out of there, and I think it will limit the area where it can be purchased in our downtown core. The arena is the heartbeat of every small community in Ontario, if not Canada, and I can obviously appreciate where the consumption is because I made comment to it, but I think Councillor Jeffrey said it very simply: if we don't ask, we'll never get. So just because we're asking doesn't mean that they're going to say, oh yeah, it makes sense. So I'm happy to support her on this one.
Councillor Hammond.
I will be supporting Deputy Mayor Hall's views on this.
Anyone else? Alright, then I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor? Got 4. All opposed? 5. The amendment is defeated. We'll go back then to the unit.
I have an amendment to this as well.
Okay. Councillor Hammond.
I was taken by Councillor Berman's questions about public consultation, and what I would like to see happen, and I'll make this into a motion, but perhaps in the fall that staff bring us back a report setting out some suggestions on how we could incorporate public consultation into what's happening. And it could be, and I know staff will be, once we're eligible for a retail store, of course, our staff will be monitoring this, I'm sure. But it can be everything from, just putting a link on our website that residents can click on and provide their own comments directly to the agency, to conducting surveys. I mean, there's a whole range that we could do in public consultations, but we don't need to do it now. And that's why I'm saying, so my motion would be in further that we ask staff to bring a report to council in the fall of 2019 with suggestions on how to engage the public in consultation on the location of retail stores.
Thank you, Councillor Hammond. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to bring that motion under notices of motion, so we can deal with it subsequently, and we'll deal with the second half of this motion. I don't know that they're entirely related, given your comment that really at this point it's because we're not having the store. We have some time. So I'll ask you to bring notices of motion. So going back then to the option 1, the second 2 paragraphs, are there any questions or comments about that before I call the vote? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. I guess when I read it, I know that the province holds all the cards, but I appreciate that Councillor Hamlin said that we had beefed it up, because I really got the sense that it was a little weak. And maybe not strong enough, like words like discourage for me, was not really, I think it's a motivator for anybody that they come in and say, well, that municipality finds that discouraging, that it would be. So, you know, with the deputy mayor's comments, that maybe we can come back to it, revisit and start to strengthen where we think we can as we see things unfold. I was going to ask maybe to see if council supported having staff strengthen it up even more, but I think there's so much we don't know, maybe it's just too soon to ask that.
Right, and I guess Councillor Jeffrey, Deputy Mayor Hall's comments were really dealing with the smoking bylaw. At this point in time, we're talking about the policy statement and getting back to the ACGO, and so, or AGCO. So, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, I guess I'm asking that council support strengthening some of the descriptors. I like the intent, I just think we need to be stronger if we really want people to listen. I haven't heard from any other members of council or where there's anywhere else where we can do some advocacy works with the AGCO in terms of not getting any notice directly, having to wait until somebody posts a piece of paper on a building for us and then we have to see it. That would be like me saying with item E3 that we're going to respond to them, but they'll need to check our iCompass portal for when we do post it so that they can get our feedback. Like, it's just really crazy. So maybe under a notice of motion or something that we can maybe consider some advocacy work through AMO or somebody. I'm sure maybe they're already doing it, we just haven't heard about it. But I just really found our statement weak, but maybe that's because we have no other choice. But I just found the word discourage wasn't really.
Well, put that through Director Farr, but I think AMO has been involved in that, and the AMO comments were incorporated in our initial report. And the staff report makes reference to the AMO template.
Well, this was their, I guess their recommendation, but it was by municipality. Like we have the autonomy to do that statement as a municipality, but they did offer the starting point. So, but I'm assuming, I'm hoping they're still going on after the province for some changes going forward, that they're not just going to let us sit here and wallow in this.
Well, I guess there's no guarantee. But hopefully there could be an advocacy issue, and if you want to bring that under a separate notice of motion, then I think we can entertain it then, but right now we're having to vote with what we know.
And is there an opportunity then through you, Mayor Saunderson, to the clerk to address the policy statement at a later date with new information?
I don't know the answer to that. Okay, that appears to be ongoing. Okay. Any other questions or comments on the second half of this motion, option 1? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote, and just clarification, Councillor Madigan, did you want to record a vote on both aspects?
Sure. Everybody gets exercise that way. We've sat here long enough discussing it, might as well stand up and stretch.
I'll pass it over to the clerk.
Certainly. All those in favor of the motion, please rise. Thank you. May be seated. Carried unanimous.
All right, well, we'll see what the follow is from that. We're going to 9.1.2, Deputy Mayor, Municipal and School Board election.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Colby. Be it resolved that Council receives staff report C 2019-02 with respect to all actions implemented during the 2018 municipal election that enhance accessibility for information purposes as required in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act.
I'll turn to the clerk just for a brief update on this, please.
Certainly, through your worship, to members of council and the public, as described at our strategic initiative meeting last week, this is a requirement of the province to provide a report to your council prior to 90 days after municipal election, confirming that you abided by your accessibility commitment and your procedures, and ensuring that the electorate is enfranchised to vote in your process, whatever alternative method that you choose. And we describe in the report a number of the extra opportunities that Collingwood capitalized on during this, including our various facilities and their accessibility components already together with them. Together with this election, we provided a mobile roving help center. So we were able to attend to locations where individuals were not able to get out and to attend the help center for assistance and some of the other initiatives that were incorporated.
Thank you very much. Questions or comments around the table? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. 9.1.3, policy B20, fit for duty.
Thank you. Again, Mayor Saunderson, moved by me and seconded by Councillor Colby. Be it resolved, the Council receives staff report HR 2019-01 and approve policy D-20, fit for duty as presented.
Unless Manager McQuaig, I'm going to call you forward to speak to this briefly. Thank you.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. This policy was presented at the Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting last week, and I won't recap it again, but it will, the intent is to address the issue of impairment in our workplace. I will outline a couple of amendments that were made from the SIC meeting. One was just the effect on town finances. The information that was provided verbally has now been included in the report. And the other thing I did want to point out was one of the members had requested as to whether volunteers being committee members were covered in this policy. In discussions with the clerk and consulting with our CAO, we believe that that issue is more clearly addressed in the Council Code of Conduct. So that document will be looked at and will likely incorporate the principles that are outlined in the Fit for Duty policy as well. If Council does have any other questions, though, I do have Michelle Blanchette, our Health and Safety Coordinator, here with me as well if there are more questions.
Good, thank you. Before you run away, I will ask Council any questions around the table. Council Brown. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you to Clerk Almas. During our, I believe, first council orientation, the Integrity Commissioners talked about coming in at some point and updating and tweaking our code of conduct and whatnot. So as councillors and volunteers and whatnot will not be part of this, I guess twofold. Number one, when do you expect that to happen roughly? That the Integrity Commissioners will start that process, and number two would be, will Council have an opportunity to add their comments at that time?
Certainly, through Your Worship to members of Council, the Integrity Commissioners provided their comments on recommendations they would suggest to be tweaked in it. However, the Code of Conduct is Council's document, so Council will really any sort of review that you want initiated. I know that from the staff's perspective, there's a few items that we would like to incorporate, such as the concern about fit for duty policies to be kind of consistent, knowing that they're not employees. Regardless, that will be coming forward in the near future. We have a number of very important initiatives that we're working on, so we would like to see it sooner than later. I'm not putting a date on it at this point.
I didn't need an exact date, thank you. Is that something that would come through the SIC?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Questions, Council? Seeing none, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? It's carried unanimously. Thank you, Melissa. Standing Committee report.
Thank you. Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved that Council received the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee report from its meeting held January the 7th, 2019 as presented.
Thank you, and I think we've gone over all the items that were covered at that SIC. Is there anything you wish to add to any of that, Deputy Mayor?
I don't have anything.
Any questions or concerns around the table? All right, seeing none. All in favor? That are my words. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item is 10.1, Bill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act. I will look to Director Farrar for that.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. And first, I apologize. This did not go to Development and Operations Committee. where it might have normally started. But it didn't go there because frankly the comments are due on Sunday and our development and operations meeting isn't until Monday. So that's why we are bringing it straight to council. The point of this report is to give council some background about the Bill 66, which is currently been introduced, and we have been asked to comment on it. The positive parts of this bill is that it is designed to make economic development easier in this municipality and reduce the amount of review that new economic development opportunities have to go through. The other side of this issue is that a lot of our normal checks and balances, as I have described them, that normally are in place to ensure that planning is done in a environmentally sustainable and economically sustainable manner, are being put aside in order to make allowances for economic development. And with that brief summary, Mayor Saunderson, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nancy. Questions, comments? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship. I do generally agree with the comments in this staff report, and I'm certainly in support of any activity that would speed up the review and processing time, reduce duplication, and encourage economic development. However, I am deeply concerned about the implications of Schedule 10 of Bill 66 on the health of our community members and the environment. I do believe that we could go further in our comments back to the ministry in this regard. Any legislation that would propose to supersede the Clean Water Act has potential to put every resident in Ontario at risk of a possible repetition of Walkerton. And that's one thing that Schedule 10 proposes to do. The Greenbelt Act, the Great Lakes Protection Act, the Lake Simcoe Protection Act, and the Provincial Policy Statement and Places to Grow Act are all significant pieces of legislation designed to protect and benefit the residents of Ontario from uncontrolled, unregulated development. Further, at this time, the Act is not clear as to what manner of development is considered an economic development to the community under this legislation, and thus it is possible that residential may also be incorporated into this legislation ultimately. We have already, this legislation would mean that applications would not be subject to the town's urban design guidelines, nor would they require an approved site development agreement. We've already seen how developments can run awry of our planning and building rules even when these rules are in place. So finally, and very importantly, this legislation precludes the need for public notice or public meeting and any right to appeal a decision made under the Open for Business bylaw. And this flies in the face of this council's commitment to open, transparent, and accountable governance. Presently, the Regional Municipality of Waterloo, the Town of Aurora, the Town of Richmond Hill have already passed resolutions in opposition of Bill 66. The mayors of Barrie, Hamilton, Burlington, Halton Hills, Milton, Oakville, and Guelph have also come out against Bill 66. Right now, there is a surplus of 2,919 hectares of industrially zoned lands in Simcoe County, and there are roughly 70 available surplus hectares of industrial land in the town of Collingwood. In my view, there is no need to undertake any activity to further open up lands for industrial use. We have previously spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees defending the sanctity of the Silver Creek wetlands. In my view, no development, large or small, should be allowed to bypass the regulations that protect sensitive natural areas, such as have been provided by the Places to Grow Act. Ontario should be part of reversing a trend toward the loss of sensitive lands, not increasing it. Thus, I am proposing an amendment to this staff report, which would be an addition to the staff report. And it would read as follows for the consideration of council. The town of Collingwood supports any legislation that in principle advances economic development in our community. However, in light of the unanswered questions raised by Schedule 10 of Bill 66 relative to its impacts on future planning applications and the ability of council and the public to maintain our commitment to protecting our shared environment and the safety of our residents for future generations, the town of Collingwood does not support Bill 66 in its current form. And further, that council requests that staff report comments include that the proposed Schedule 10 be amended from its current form to ensure that the municipalities do not have the ability to waive normal requirements that ensure best planning practices and principles to protect our shared environment and the safety of our residents for future generations.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Doherty. I think before I get a seconder, I'd like, I had to discuss with the CAO, Amin, who's been Deputy Minister of both Economic Development and Municipal Affairs. This is enabling legislation which a municipality can opt in or out of. So I think it just gets some comments in terms of the economic development context and because there I think is some positive in this, as you've noted, and would like to get a better understanding of what the impact is when rubber hits the road on this. And so I'd like to CAO for his comments.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to members of council. So this is enabling legislation. There's nothing in here that forces the municipality to do anything. We just had a discussion about who holds all the levers, and this is an attempt to try and provide municipality with the autonomy it says it wants to deal with development proposals. There's nothing in here that forces the municipality to act in an irresponsible or in a way that is disrespectful to public consultation, to environmental consideration, to infrastructure or planning. This is simply an attempt to try and enhance the competitiveness of Ontario municipalities. Of course, there are many ways that you can deal with that competitiveness, but one of the big issues that's impacting investment attraction across Ontario is the length of planning applications and related studies required to support development. While we may have an abundance of industrial land across Simcoe County, there are still a number of planning approvals that have to be obtained to bring those lands to investment-ready status. So again, this doesn't mean that municipalities will act in an irrational, irresponsible, or a way that is that doesn't engage the public. This is an option that municipalities will have. It can choose not to exercise that option. But in the spirit of trying to deal with development proposal in an expeditious way and providing municipalities with a great deal of autonomy, the province has suggested that this is a potential route that we can go. I think it would be more helpful if we provide the province with some recommendations on what the legislation should include to try and put a fence around this development so it's more responsible, more sustainable, and meet some of the local planning objectives that we're trying to accomplish. So I don't disagree with Councillor Doherty's assessment of what could happen, but I think the submission I would posit is that potentially could be the worst case scenario. There are many municipalities that can exercise that option, but do it in a responsible way. From my own experience, almost all of the significant economic development in this province was as a result of municipal zoning order. And those municipal zoning order are exercised in a judicious way that respects the environment, that engages the public, and that put the necessary infrastructure in place to ensure that they occur in a reasonable and responsible way. So if municipalities were to exercise this power in a way that is that follows those principles, I think this could be something that that can be helpful. But again, I think we could suggest to the province that municipalities, if they decide to opt into the exercising of this power, should have the ability to put some principles around it so that we're not doing this in an irresponsible or a way that is not respectable of the planning principles that we're trying to promote across the municipality. So.
Thank you. So I will look for a seconder then for your motion. Put it on the table. Councillor Jeffrey. Okay.
Mayor Saunderson, would it not be correct if I read the original motion to get amended?
Well, the motion's been read on the table, is it not?
No, because I have it.
Oh, you have it?
And you went right to Director Farrar.
Oh, okay. My apologies. Put it on the table then.
That's all right. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor MacLeod, be it resolved that staff report P 2019-01 recommending council submit the proposed comments to the ministry by required date, January 20th, 2019, be approved.
Good, thank you. Now we'll place that back 10 minutes. Fast forward 10 minutes, and here we are. And so we have Councillor Doherty's amendment on the floor that's been seconded by Councillor Jeffrey, and we will put the amendment on the floor for discussion. Questions or comments? I'll start with Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to take the opportunity to read an open letter that was prepared by Simcoe County Greenbelt. That was their open letter to all mayors and council. And just a small excerpt. It says, Read Bill 66, Restoring Ontario's Competitive Act. And the part I'd like to read are, these policies which are under attack are not small, insignificant pieces of legislation. Rather, they are keystone policies that keep our water clean and safe to drink, including the Clean Water Act, the Lake Simcoe Protection Act, and the Great Lakes Protection Act. And that was one of the comments I wanted to share, and I know members of council also received an email, of course, prior to council from the Blue Mountain Watershed Trust, sharing their concerns as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Just, if I may, through you, I'll just respond to the CAO's comments. Just to say that I absolutely appreciate that this is enabling legislation and that is no municipality must pass this kind of a zoning bylaw. However, I do not believe that the protection of water, the protection of the environment, or the protection of best municipal governance practices should even be on the table. And if there are ways to open up our competitiveness in this province, surely there are other ways to do it.
I take the comments, and I guess what that CAO was saying is that that power is already present in the province through a ministerial order. And so to some extent, not some extent, they are giving now municipalities the ability to do the same in the name of economic development, I think, and the understanding that you would hope that the municipality is not going to do something that's going to compromise our safety, because we have ultimate liability, as you know, from the Clean Water Drinking Act. So if you're going to pass legislation that's going to foist liability on each member around this table, there are checks and balances, but you're right, it is an end run. And I take the concerns, and I think it's a balancing act, and I think think that's really where it leaves you. So the province has that ability. Does the municipality want it? We have very little leeway to work, as we know, through the growth policies, and that was a big issue around this table. And now we're given a tool to only be used in the most exigent of circumstances. And the issue is, are we prepared to take it or not? And I think, I mean, you've got your motion on the table. I think there may be ways to spin it in a more positive light, to say that we would ask that Schedule 10 be amended such that municipalities respect normal requirements that ensure best planning practices and principles to protect our shared environment and safety of our residents for future generations. But
yeah. Sorry, Your Worship, and that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that we don't, I'm not disagreeing with the amendment, but I'm advocating that we can actually have a more impactful response if we were to make some suggestions about how the legislation could be improved. Because, after all, we've asked for autonomy at municipal level, and this is one way of getting it. And the notion is that this level of autonomy will be exercised in a judicial and responsible way.
Councillor Hamlin.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to our CAO, I totally appreciate your ideas about making practical suggestions. But today's January the 14th, and we have only till January 20th to make submissions on this. And what are your thoughts if we were to do such a thing, how we could pull something together that we could approve by that time?
Well, through Your Worship, one way of doing it is for us to prepare a letter that we can send off to the Minister of Municipal Affairs to incorporate some of the ideas and suggestions made by Councillor Doherty. And some of the ideas and suggestions that we have as staff to try and provide the ministry with some more meaningful provisions, that if this were to get to third reading and royal assent, some of those things can be incorporated into the actual final bill. So one of the things that I have talked about is, if municipalities are given this authority, the municipalities who opt in should have the ability to set rules for opting in. So if Collingwood were to opt in, Collingwood could say that we are opting under the condition that we maintain our public notice provisions, our public consultation provision, and that we require that this development occurred in a responsible, respectful, environmentally sensitive manner. But I think it is also useful for us to think about having the ability to expedite economic development proposals that could be of benefit to this community, because if we don't, other communities probably will be more attractive to investors. So I'm not denigrating good planning principles. I'm saying that there is a trade-off, and the trade-off could be for us as a municipality to come up with provisions that make sense within our local context.
So, Mr. Mayor, for you, I totally, agree with that approach, that we should be making a practical suggestion. I am very supportive of Councillor Doherty's comments, and our CAO has picked up on them. It's almost abhorrent to me that this legislation would suggest that don't mention anything to your residents. Don't let them know. Don't ask them what they think. So I think if we could incorporate some of those things, and something I had thought about is perhaps as a municipality we would say we would consider applications in this particular area and draw a line around it, so like not the waterfront. So there's I believe that there are practical approaches, and I would be in support of something we would send to the ministry that would embody the concerns that Councillor Doherty has set out very eloquently, but come up with some practical solutions on how the legislation could be better so that we could use it.
The only other point I'd make is that in addition to coming up with what seems to be good planning considerations, we could also suggest the kind of investment that we will be looking at. So we're not looking at noxious industries, we're not looking at things that could result in significant land use incompatibility. But in today's economic competitive climate, and given the nature of the industries that are looking for homes, I don't think we're contemplating uses that could be that could have a significant impact on the residents or businesses in that area. So I'm saying, in addition to the planning principles, there are investment ideas that could limit the kind of industries that we will contemplate fast tracking if and when we decide to do that. So there are all kinds of conditions one can attach to this to prevent, quote unquote, any reckless approval without adequate public input.
Councillor Berlin, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. The conditions that, through you to the CAO, the conditions that you're talking about, do they need to be submitted in 6 days as well?
Well, we will have to get through your worship. We will have to get our comments back to the ministry within the timeline. Although this is first reading, so you know, I would guess that if we don't get our comment back, you know, there's still a possibility that our comment will be taken into consideration because the House is not in session, and the bill would not go out for committee hearings until after second reading. So we've got some time to be able to put forth something that is meaningful and impactful along the lines that Councillor Doherty is suggesting.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Doherty, last comment before we call it.
Yes, thank you. And just to clarify, the intent of my recommendation is not to impact on action that just this municipality would take, or that would be have impact only on this municipality. If this municipality were to say, well, we're not going to impact our sensitive wetlands and we will tell our citizens what applications are coming forward, it matters not if everyone else around us is following to the letter of this proposed legislation. So to me, it's either all or nothing.
Yeah, I'll pass that through to CAO.
So just one clarification through your worship. So my comments were not specific to Collingwood. If we were to come up with a set of conditions, we will argue that those conditions should be made available to all municipalities, not Collingwood. But I'm suggesting that if and when we decide, so it's a two-stage process. So we can send the comment back to the minister to say, if this power were to be made available to municipalities, municipalities should have the ability to do A, B, C, D, and E, sort of reflecting the comments that you were making. I'm saying over and above that, Collingwood, if it opts in, should have the ability to implement those conditions available to all municipalities, but also be able to customize whatever resolution it passes to reflect our own unique circumstances, because there's some industries that we elect to promote want. So I'm not saying that the conditions will only apply to us. It would be conditions that we recommend apply to all municipalities. But then in the second stage, if we were to go down that route, then we would have the ability to customize whatever resolution we adopt to meet our local circumstances.
All right. Deputy Mayor.
Maybe a question of clarification. And maybe not a question that can unfortunately be answered this evening, but there has been, to Councillor Doherty's earlier comments, there has been vocal opposition and stated opposition, both from public but also from a number of significant municipalities across the province, both from the council as a whole, but from the head of council. And the question of clarification is the opposition, to the best of our knowledge, consistent to this portion of the proposed legislation?
Well, I think I understand Councillor Doherty's motion. It's Schedule 10 that you object to, which has a lot of the details. I think what we're, as I understand the CAO, what he's saying is we are in support in principle, as is Councillor Doherty. We're not saying to scrap Schedule 10, we're saying to attach some very real restrictions that are going to limit the ability to implement that. So I think rather than, what I'm hearing is, rather than just say, no, we object, we're saying we see significant problems, we would like you to revisit these, and if you can attach these conditions, then this is something Collingwood might consider opting into. Again, this is a piece of provincial legislation that's at the first reading, and we don't have control of the province. And my reading of this government is when you say no, they proceed. So what we're trying to do is to direct them to make changes that we think would make this legislation palatable. That we don't see it right now being palatable as it is. So we're trying to make constructive criticism that we feel may influence the outcome. I think that's as I hear the CAO.
Could I have a supplementary question to that? To your point and to the CAO's point, and then questions that have already been asked regarding the timeline of our comments. My gut tells me that 444 municipalities will have an opportunity to comment. They're going to do what they want to do anyways. That's my gut. But I think it would be prudent if the CAO was suggesting that perhaps there is an opportunity to comment past the 20th. Could we do so? And if so, do we defer the councillors' amendment this evening to allow us another whatever time period that we feel comfortable with to put together some additional thoughts or comments?
Through your worship, I would not recommend that we defer. I think we should get our comments in, even if it is a placeholder. I guess just to clarify what I said is that I don't think if we submit our comments a few days late, it will be ignored because this is only first reading, and we'll have other opportunities as well. I mean, I suspect that this goes to second reading and it goes, I don't know if it will go to committee, but one option is for this to be sent to committee. Municipalities and others will have the opportunity to make deputations before that committee to put forward their case. So far, I think we've heard a lot about this from some municipalities and others. I am coming at it from a slightly different perspective, which is the economic development, competitiveness, investment attraction piece. And there's going to be a very unlevel playing field if this were to go through, and some municipalities decide to opt in and others decide not to, because what Councillor Doherty described is a possibility, but from an investment point of view, it means that some will better able to attract investment, and some may have a bit more of a challenging time because of the length of time it would take to get these get the requisite planning and environmental and other permits required to facilitate those investments.
Councillor Roy, I'll give you the last word and then we'll call the vote.
Thank you. With respect, I think the best way to ensure that there's no uneven playing field is to throw it out the way it is right now and rewrite it, frankly.
Okay. With that said, I will call.
I just have, sorry, one more question, through you, Mr. Mayor, to our CAO. I just want to make sure I understand what our options are. So one option, well, what I'm hearing is an option would be for us to authorize staff to send a response on recommendations on how this legislation could better suit our municipality and other municipalities along the lines we've been discussing, and that would go in by January the 20th. And then could we then have that report come back to a subsequent council meeting, and if there were other comments that council wanted to make at that time, would that be a feasible approach?
Through you, Your Worship, it's feasible, but I think I'd like to to be able to get our comments in within the deadline, and that way, regardless of what our comments are, we can be assured that there is no excuse for them to disregard our comments. So if we get the comments back in time, then they would have to be considered. If they're late, then it's an excuse for them not considering it. The one point I think we all know is that this power currently resides with the province. So through the Municipal zoning order, this authority can be exercised. What this does is that it allows municipality to have that option. So my recommendation would be that staff be authorized to prepare a letter to the minister to reflect the comments made by Councillor Doherty, and to also suggest ways that the legislation, if proceed, can contain or give municipalities the option of including provisions in there to respect the planning process, the public consultation process, and all the requisite Water Resources Act and anything else that's in Schedule 10 that we think might be offensive.
I would support that.
Okay, well, then I'm gonna call the vote on the amendment. Councillor Doherty?
No.
Can you read the amendment that
Yes,
you
I
wrote
will,
just before we vote? You got it?
because I think it really, because this amendment is a blend of my original and some feedback from the clerk. So we may in fact be talking about the same thing. I'll reread it. The town of Collingwood supports any legislation that in principle advances the economic development in our community. However, in light of the unanswered questions raised by Schedule 10 of Bill 66 relative to its impacts on future planning applications and the ability of council and the public to maintain our commitment to protecting our shared environment and the safety of our residents for future generations, the town of Collingwood does not support Bill 66 in its current form. And further that, council requests that these comments included in the proposed Schedule 10 be amended from its current form to ensure that the municipalities do not have the ability to waive normal requirements that ensure best planning practices and principles to protect our shared environment and safety of our residents for future generations.
All right, I'm going to call the vote then. All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? All right. Do we need to amend the current wording of the motion on the table to incorporate the comments we just had? I don't know if the wording of the motion as is submitted, because the proposed comments I don't think probably go far enough to incorporate what the CAO has spoken about tonight.
Mayor Saunderson, as the original mover.
Yes.
I've conferred with my original seconder. I'm happy to let our CAO so eloquently add his words to the motion.
Sure, that's great, but I'd like to get the words out before we go around. So, yeah.
Certainly, through the discussion, I've come up with the following that we can put forward and have a conversation on. And further, the council support comments to be included that request municipalities be given the ability to set their own rules should they wish to utilize the enabling legislation to ensure best planning practices and principles of other legislation for investments that are complementary and compatible to our municipality.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only addition I would make there is that that the municipalities be allowed to incorporate principles that reflect good planning principles, environmental practices, and public consultation. I think in essence what I'm doing here is basically turning Councillor Doherty's last couple of phrases into more positive statements, rather than saying we don't support it because of all these things. I'm saying we will support if these things are being considered, and those things are the planning principles, the environmental considerations, and the public input.
And further, council supports comments be included that request municipalities be given the ability to set their own rules should they wish to use the enabling legislation to ensure that best planning principles, environmental practices, and public consultation, as well as principles of other legislations for investments that are complementary and compatible to our municipality.
We're considering that a friendly amendment.
Absolutely.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I guess my only question is would arise from Councillor Doherty's comments regarding the impact other municipalities surrounding us can have. Even though you give us the right to be responsible that way, how are the other municipalities being responsible for us, or how are we being responsible for our neighbors, and how do we have that included in the bill?
So through you, Your Worship, I think what we're suggesting is that all municipalities be given the authority to include these provisions in an opting-in scenario, not only us.
So I take the question, is it permissive or requirement? So should it be shall, all municipalities shall, or all municipalities may? I think that's just the question as I take it.
Right, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just to explain further is that just because we give, say, Clearview Township the right to set environmental standards, they may not. Us having the right to do that, we can't impact what they are doing. So the overall bill needs to have that responsibility included in it regarding environment, I guess.
Yeah, through Your Worship. Sure, we can include that provision in there. My only comment would be that, you know, if right now we have no jurisdiction over what Clearview does, and they can decide to allow a development without I mean, they have rules they comply with, but there are things that they might be able to do without our consent. So it would be up to the province. Again, this is enabling, this is not prescriptive. And we can suggest that municipalities shall be given the authority to impose conditions if they choose to opt in. But I think that would be the prerogative of the provincial government if they decide. Again, this is enabling. Municipalities can decide to be part of this regime or not. This is municipal autonomy.
I think it's a philosophical question, really, at the end of the day. I mean, it's a discretionary remedy, and I think to the extent there's municipal autonomy, we can't control other municipalities, but given an extraordinary power, does the province want to limit the circumstances in which that would be implemented? And so the shall, I think, obligates the municipality to do that versus the permissive. And so I guess we will settle with the shall and see how that goes. Okay, so if you can read again, Sarah. So
So this is at the word including shall, so if this is the right area, if you could let me know. And further, council support comments be included that require municipalities shall be given the ability to set their own rules should they wish to utilize the enabling legislation to ensure robust planning principles, environmental practices, public consultation.
Maybe we should change shall to be obligated. I think that's what we're looking for. We're trying to impose on all municipalities, as I take it, the responsibility to address this at the outset. So municipalities shall be obligated to set.
Certainly, and further council support comments be included that require municipalities shall be obligated to set their own rules should they wish to utilize the enabling legislation to ensure planning principles, environmental practices, and public consultation, as well as principles of other legislation for investments that are complementary and compatible to our municipality.
To the municipality be respected. Or
compatible to the respective municipality.
So is that a friendly amendment then? Move it a seconder or prepared to accept it?
I think it would be an amendment made by moving a seconder.
So just for clarification, when I mentioned earlier that we were willing to move it, and with respect to Councillor Doherty's fantastic comments and CAOs, I mean, we didn't mean any disrespect trying to further it, we were just saying that we're open to it.
Right.
That's all we were trying to do.
So I think in terms of process then, this is an amendment. So if you're prepared to adopt the amendment, then we will vote on that now.
I am.
Okay, so we've got that. So unless there's any questions or comments, I'm going to call the vote. Yeah, Councillor Doherty.
I'm just going to make the point that I can't support this unless this legislation applies equally to all municipalities in the spirit in which I offered my amendment tonight, then I can't support it.
Okay, I guess that's a decision you'll have to make, so. That said then, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Noted. Moving down the agenda then. Oh, sorry. So then going back to the initial motion as moved by Councillor Madigan and seconded by Councillor McLeod, which is that staff report P 2019-1 recommending council submit the proposed comments to the ministry by the required date, January 20, 2019 be approved. Call the vote then. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Motions. We're starting off with Councillor Berman. Yes, so Councillor Berman, I understand we're going to defer your 11.1 motion until after the in-camera session, because there's some in-camera aspect, some legal advice on that.
Yes, thank you. Do we need to vote on whether can you make that?
Oh, I think we can defer it. We're going to defer this, so when we come out of camera, we'll be voting on it. Okay, thank you. Rise and report. So the second motion then 11.2.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. Whereas the town of Collingwood is implementing a system to record both the voting record and attendance of all regular council meetings that will be available on the town website. And whereas in an effort to enhance transparency, it would be prudent to extend this practice to standing committees, therefore be it resolved that council recommend further amending procedural bylaw 2016-020 to also require a record of attendance and voting for all substantive matters to be maintained for all standing committees of council. And do you give us a slide of what we currently have?
Okay.
Sorry, through your worship to members of council. This is what has been set up on our iCompass portal right now. So as soon as you come in to the council meeting and agenda program, there is an area, I don't know if you can go maybe back one, yeah. So right here is the portal that you enter in when you look at any council or committee or board business. And if you scroll down, there is a tab already set up that says attendance and voting. If you click that, if you scroll down, we'll just leave it at this slide here. So this is where right now the council's voting records as well as your attendance will be noted for council meetings. And if supported by council this evening, we will be incorporating standing committees into this as well. So the record of voting for standing committees and attendance would also be included in this public forum.
Thank you. Councillor Berman, do you want to comment on your motion now or at the end?
No, I can do it now. Thank you, Ms. Saunderson. Really, it's twofold. First and foremost, it's to, I believe that the residents have a right to know the voting record of their elected officials, and that includes what we do at SIC and at our other two committees. So the system's already in place. This would really just be adding that information under the committee section. And secondly, we have the three committees. The SIC is one that all of us take part in, but the other two committees are split into groups of 5. And when the recommendations that each committee makes comes forward to all of council, as they did tonight, it would, I think it would help us to know how the committee that we weren't on felt when the recommendation comes forward, because right now the agenda would simply say that there was a recommendation. It doesn't tell us whether it was passed unanimously and vetted through 5 people that we trust and we work with, or if it passed 3-2, and it would give us the opportunity before a council meeting to do a little more due diligence on what the concerns were with anything that came forward like that. So it would save time at a council meeting of having to ask all of that at the table. We could do our due diligence in advance.
Thank you. And the council, questions or comments around the table?
Sorry. And if I may, can I ask for a recorded vote?
Okay. All right then, I will pass it to the clerk. Oh, sorry, did you have a seconder for your motion, Councillor Berman?
I thought I said it, and my apologies, Councillor Jeffrey.
Okay. Oh. Thank you, Councillor Berman. So, okay, I'll give it to you now.
I'm seeing there's no further comment. All those in favor of the motion, please rise. Thank you. Motion is carried unanimous. You may be seated.
And 11.3, Councillor Hammond, this is your motion.
Yes, thank you. This is a motion that's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that Council herein requests procedural bylaw 2016-020 be amended to require notice for standing committee meetings be not less than 72 hours, consistent with regular meetings of Council.
Thank you. Do you have anything you want to speak?
Yes, this issue arose, I think, at our first meeting of SIC, as the bylaw only requires 48 hours notice to council, and that would be when we would get our agenda. So having spoke to our clerk Almas, we came up with, it was actually her suggestion, that we handle this by having all our council committees with the same notice of 72 hours, which is the notice for council meetings. So that's what's behind this.
Good, thank you. Questions or comments around the table? Councillor Madigan.
Thanks, Mayor Saunderson. Will this include emergency meetings as well? Sometimes they're very time sensitive, so I just looked at our clerk and she said no, so I got my answer, but maybe for the public stream, live stream, they can hear your voice, say no.
No, we still have our time frames in place for emergency and special meetings, and they range between 24 and 48 hours, but that's only for extreme circumstances.
Cool, thank you.
And typically those meetings have just one agenda. place any motion. Don't see any other questions then, I'm gonna call a vote. All in favor? That is unanimous. Do I have a motion?
Oh, sorry, the paperwork.
So I'll just turn to the clerk because this will require amendment of the procedural bylaw, and so if you can explain that for council, thank you.
Certainly, the notice of motions that come forward, council has voted on 2 of them tonight, and the other matter will be addressed following the in-camera, but just for the public's information and council's information, when an amendment to a procedural bylaw is required, a notice has to go into the paper 1 week in advance of the council meeting in which the bylaw will be considered. So this will be coming forward based on council's recommendation this evening in a consolidated bylaw amendment on January the 28th, I believe. Yes.
Thank you. Item 12.1, bylaws. Who would have that?
I have that.
Yeah.
Yes, moved by me and seconded by Councillor Jeffrey. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-001, being a bylaw to amend the composition of and appoint directors of the Downtown Collingwood Business Improvement Area Board of Management, be enacted and passed this 14th day of January 2019. Shall I read the? Yes.
Please.
So appointed to the Board of Management, Alex Ewan, Megan Borofsky, Craig Ashton, Paul Feather, David Conning, Bradley Green, Carolina Dandria, Penny Skelton, and Council Representative Councillor Tina Comey.
Council, any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is unanimous. Any notices of motion today? Deputy Mayor, County Report.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you to council, staff, and members of the public. There are 4 items actually I'd like to draw people's attention to, specific to the county and the implications that they have for the town of Collingwood. One is, the first is a bit of a housekeeping issue, and that is that, as many are aware, at the outset of the inauguration of the County of Simcoe for the next 2 years, we have elected George Cornell, Mayor George Cornell, who is now warden for the county, and he represents the municipality of Tiny, and the county will now represent the interests of Simcoe County as a whole. And Barry Burton, Mr. Barry Burton, who is the deputy mayor for Clearview Township, has been elected deputy warden for the next 2 years. I say 2 years because it's a 2-year term. At the end of the 2 years, if they are uncontested, we carry on. If they are contested, there would be a vote and a potential for an inauguration for the next 2-year period after that. The next thing that I would just like to bring to people's attention is that again, sort of a housekeeping carryover from the past term, but as people are aware, at St. Paul and Ontario Street, we've got a new ambulance service bay that has been opened. We should look for some type of an announcement from the county specific to a grand opening for that particular facility. The next is that, as people are aware, at the corner of High and 2nd Street, the 2 buildings that are ongoing in terms of construction for the affordable housing units that will be operated by the County of Simcoe are on target for completion and opening. One building for potentially the spring, summer, the other building for the summer, fall of 2019. These are quite significant, not only in the fact that they are the addition of 144 units for housing that is desperately needed within this particular community and the county as a whole, but they will also be the new homes for several agencies, including Ontario Works, etc., who provide services for many of our residents, not only who will be living on site, but who live across the town and region as a whole. And it'll be a nice hub so that members who are accessing these services will be able to have sort of a one-stop shop in that effect. The buildings have not been named or branded, but they do have civic addresses. They are 475 and 485 2nd Street. And the reason I mention that is that I believe it was Councillor Dorian, perhaps it was Councillor Hamlin, had mentioned at a previous council meeting that for those who are interested in applying for application to reside within the buildings, those application, or the process is actually already started. And if you're interested in further information or completing an application, you can find them now in two convenient locations. One is through simco.ca, which is the county website, and you can simply find the application under social housing, which is under one of the department headings. And as of today, and I greatly appreciate the prompt response for staff, we have added an icon to the town website where you can simply click on that icon, and again, it will take you through to the county site and to the applicant, to the area of where you can pull up the application. And so I appreciate having that added. Last week at the Committee of Whole, the 2019 county budget was presented and the draft budget was approved. It will now go to council. The next council meeting is Tuesday, January the 22nd for approval. I anticipate approval. At this point, we're looking at a 2% increase to the county portion of the county levy. And if approved, we can then present further details in terms of what that will actually mean for residents on a per $100,000 assessment, etc., so people can get an actual dollar and cents as to what that will, how it will impact their taxes for the year 2019. A couple of highlights, though, specific to the budget that relate to the town of Collingwood. One, I just mentioned, was it will allow for the completion of the buildings at Hume and 2nd Streets. Second is that there will be some additional waste pickups in the summer months. This was something that was brought forward by other area municipalities at the request of residents, and of course will apply to the town of Collingwood as well. And perhaps most importantly, it will mean that in 2019, the transit link through the county will come to Collingwood. Last year, through the previous county council and the administration, there was the rollout of the new transit link plan that linked municipalities such as Penetanguishene, Midland, etc., through to the city of Barrie. We will have a new transit link that will be hopefully rolled out by the summer of 2019 that will connect the city of, or the town of Collingwood to neighboring municipalities, including the town of Wasaga Beach, Clearview Township. It will go all the way down through to Baseport, I believe, and then back up through to the city of Barrie. And this is quite significant in the sense that it not only provides connectivity within the county, but really, I think, is a true benefit to a large percentage of our residents. And if I can, I'll just mention there were a couple of comments that were passed along by other county councillors who've experienced success of the rollout of the first phase of this plan in the other municipalities, as I mentioned. One was a councillor who passed along favorable comments to Mayor Saunderson, where there was direct tangible results where employees who were not necessarily able to get from one part of the county to another were able to do so. And I see that will carry forward here. It's no shortage, it's been lots of discussion about the labor shortage within our community and the community to the west in terms of the town of Blue Mountains as it relates to the service industry, etc. One of the challenges that we have here is that we are not necessarily an affordable community to live in on a service wage, and therefore I think this will benefit not only residents elsewhere in the county but employers here, where people may opt to choose to live in one other part of the county where they can afford to live but find employment here of their choosing and be able to access the employment and their housing through this transportation link, which is a real plus. The other was that as costs continue to escalate to operate a vehicle, there were plenty of examples, but this was a good one where, for example, a resident in a rural environment, and I think that this will also apply to the town of Collingwood, who are accessing significant services that are operated in the city of Barrie. RVH is the big one, the Royal Victoria Hospital, where residents can actually access parking, for example, here, take municipal transit to the RVH. Ease of comfort in terms of maybe those who don't want to drive in congested traffic, 400 Series Highway, etc. But also, quite frankly, it will be cheaper for somebody to park and take the municipal transit service than it would be to actually park at the RVH itself. So there are some real tangible benefits. The ridership that was predicted, I don't have the exact number, but for the first rollout of the first phase, the numbers that have come in so far year to date have exceeded those by a significant percentage point. Staff are confident that we will see these kinds of ridership numbers as we roll into phase 2 from Collingwood into Barrie. So that's a really exciting announcement, and that's part of the budget. And the last one sort of on a community announcement, and that is that today I believe was the first day, but for those who aren't aware, this is the second year that the county is operating an outdoor ice skating trail, and it's operated in Midhurst at the county museum. It's about 1 kilometer in length. I would suggest that if people are interested in taking advantage of that outdoor recreational amenity, you check the county site, 4 days that it's operating because of inclement weather, but also they've got adjusted hours so that people can take advantage of it not only during the night, the day, but there are a few nights that it's available as well. So that's the report.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That was excellent. Just on the budget number, I think it's $5.70 the tax increase represents for every $100,000 of assessment. So just to then, but a very, very thorough report. Any questions of the Deputy Mayor on that? Seeing none, then we will get into item 15.1, older deferred business. Any older deferred business? Or other business? Councilor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Sanderson. Through you to the clerk, I guess. I got my new dog license on January the 3rd, and when I went in, I asked if I could buy the lifetime one, and they told me that it wasn't available. And then I'm sure I've seen on social media to the contrary, but then when I went on just to double check on the town website today, that it isn't an option on the application form. Nor was it an option on the dog tag advertisement on the community page. So I just want some clarification because I would like to have gotten one. Quick on this.
Certainly, you can come back into the office if anybody's purchased the dog tag and they would like a lifetime tag. We do have them in. I've seen them and held one in my hand last week. So we do have them available, and we would just provide, obviously, the difference in the cost for a lifetime tag versus what an individual is paid. Right now, we do have them available, and we'll be advertising as such.
Okay, thank you.
And you can wear it proudly on your lapel.
And now I trust that one member of the media will tweet that this meeting's gone to the dogs.
Yes.
So that's all.
There's no motion over there yet. Any other business? Was that it? Okay, other business? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I was just wondering with regard to one of the things that would be a carry forward from our last term, and that was a follow-up on the lobbyist registry. I know that I had reported that AMO's recommendation through our training with LPAT is that it will be necessary going forward. And I was just wondering where we were at in our processes, or if I should be making a motion, notice of motion.
Okay, I will look to the CAO for an update on that.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Jeffrey. As I mentioned earlier, our intention is to bring forward some recommendations in response to Council's direction to look at some organizational realignment. And as part of that, the intention would be to propose setting up an accountability office within the office of the clerk to bundle all of the open government initiatives, including the lobby registry.
Thank you.
And thank you. Any others? I have one item. I would look to Director Farrar. I'm wondering, Director Farrar, I've been approached about an interest in having an area of town declared an arts district. And I'm just wondering if, from planning principles, there's anything that needs to be done, or what you might recommend in terms of pursuing that.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I don't think there's really anything in our planning documents that would be one way or the other. My one thought would be perhaps there should be some consultation with the BIA, because it would be something that I assume would be a portion of the BIA, and perhaps we would want to get their input on this idea.
Okay. Well, maybe Councillor Coleman, you're our representative, maybe you could liaise with Director Farrar and see what needs to be done and put that forward. If I can leave that with you.
Yes, I'll look forward to the first BIA meeting in order to discuss that.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other business, we have in-camera items tonight. Item 16.1, who has that motion? Councillor Jefferson.
Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Coney. Whereas the clerk hereby concurs the reasons for the in-camera session have been duly reviewed and considered, and the matters are authorized under the exception provisions to conduct the closed session in accordance with the Municipal Act prior to proceeding into closed session. Be it resolved that this council proceeds in camera in order to address a matter pertaining to litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the town or local board, the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, and the items for discussion are A, Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, 174 St. Paul Street, B, sale of the Collingwood Regional Airport, and C, recording of in-camera meeting.
Council, any questions or comments? Seeing none, I will call the vote then. All in favor of going in camera? And that is unanimous. We will now sign off from the Rogers coverage and to go in camera. So thank you for joining us, and for people in the audience. We will have a Rise report at the end of the in-camera session, which will be live streamed. So if you want to stay tuned, you can tune in through our website. Thank you very much.
Well, let's prove it.